calls. So the NFL is going to start reviewing these pass interference calls. And for me, this is a great thing. I'm excited for it. I can't wait to watch it now. But the only thing I think about is that it's going to be so much harder for DBs and receivers to get away with the small stuff that they get away with. And think about this. In the league now, receivers can already barely touch, or a defensive back can already barely touch a receiver without it being a flag. All the old tricks and stuff like that used to exist. Nah, they took that out the game. They took that straight out the game. It's a flag if you touch him on a pass now. It's a flag if you grab his hip and swat the ball on the other side. Some DBs know what I'm talking about. But my only thing is that now they get to review this stuff. So the main situation, I believe it was Sean Payton for the New Orleans Saints, the head coach, he was pushing for this change after what happened in that NFC Championship game where the Saints lost on that horrible no call. It was filthy. I can't believe they got away with it, but it was just a blatant missed call. And I mean, nobody could do anything about it because it was just, I mean, hey, like the referees didn't throw the flag. I don't know. And it was ridiculous because everybody in the stadium seen it happen. But for the Rams, it was just like, hey, well, it was a great bailout. And unfortunately, more of those are either going to come, more bailouts are either going to come, or it's going to be less bailouts. But for those of you who are huge fans of teams, I'm excited about this rule. But you got to think of the downside too. Now it can play both sides. Now we're playing a game where your receiver, he goes on a route. They call a pass interference. Coach throws a challenge flag. And now we can look at it where flags are being picked up. That's gonna piss people off. If flags are being picked up or calls are being changes, now you thought you had plus 35 yards because the defensive back was originally called for pass interference. Now it was a push off, so you were in a hole. Now you're in a hole. So it can go either way, and it's gonna be amazing to see. And I really like this rule, but man, it's tough for some of these NFL guys because as it is, it's already some bad calls going. And you know, as a fan, if you watch the NFL, regardless of how much reviewing they do, and regardless of how much replaying and time spent at the replay booth and all of that stuff, we all have seen these horrible calls. We've all have seen bad calls that were still missed. We've seen referees spend 15 minutes at the replay monitor when we clearly seen it was a pass interference at home on a TV at the same angle 5 different times. But the referees are still gathered up at the replay table looking at the same thing. I don't know what they be looking for, but they be looking at the same thing and they still miss the call, or they still get the call wrong. We've seen stuff like this happen multiple times over just the last season. We've seen it last season. They've reviewed and reviewed and reviewed. That's going to take more time. This is the only part I really don't like, is that it's going to take up more time and things like that. The game is already pretty slow, especially if you're watching some bad teams or things like that. And or if your team is in a bad game or anything like that, they're playing pretty slow, can't get anything off and can't score or anything like that. That kind of stuff will slow the game down a lot. It's going to slow the game down so much. And games usually last about 2 hours and some change, 3 hours if it's going on longer and things like that. But at max, about 3 hours. And now it's probably going to be a little longer, depending on how much they review. They got to be careful here because you don't want the referees reviewing too much and taking away from the gameplay. When you sit down and watch your favorite team play, you want to watch football. You want to watch people make catches. You want to watch running backs run, quarterbacks throw, linemen block. You want to watch football. You want to watch people play the game. So if you're watching the game and you see every 2 plays, it's a review on a play, it starts to take away from the game. And that's really where the NFL has to be careful. And I understand they want to get things right. They want to make sure the game is called fairly. Even though sometimes it seems like some referees are paid off. Seems like that might be the case. But they still want to make sure the game is called fairly. Want to make sure they get every call right. But it's hard to do that in a game that's so fast. When you look at receivers and DBs, you're talking about some of the best athletes in the world right there. And those guys move quick. They bust moves quick and all of that stuff. Pretty soon, I feel like it's going to eventually, it starts with the DBs and stuff, especially now because it's a passing league where quarterbacks are throwing the ball so many times in one game, throwing for 400 yards, even if they're not a great quarterback. But at one point, that was unheard of. Quarterbacks, you weren't throwing the ball, you wasn't throwing for 400 yards if you wasn't that guy. Especially if you didn't have the receiving core and things like that. You wasn't doing it on accident. Now it's a lot of quarterbacks in the league throwing for 4-something or 3-something, like consistently. And yeah, that's cool, but eventually the receiver play and the DB and receiver play with these flag calls is going to keep going down more and more positions where it's going to get to running backs and the linemen, blocking calls, things like that, targeting calls. We already see those targeting calls and things like that are happening way too often. You almost can't even hit anybody now. Every hard hit somebody makes is a flag. And at one point in time, I talked about that, and that's really disturbing. When you watch the game, that's what we live for. That's what we want to watch. That as a defensive guy, if you're a defensive guy and you're watching the game and you see a linebacker come up and straight nail a running back, that's what you want to see. That stuff makes you excited. It brings energy to the stadium. It brings energy to the fans, and it cranks up the intensity. And to take that kind of stuff away, it really hurts, man. It really hurts, and it had its effects. Because I get that they want to make the game safer, but you got to think about it. Why was Ray Lewis considered such a great player? One, he had that intensity, and two, he was such a big hitter. You come Ray Lewis's way, you knew what was going to happen. You knew it was the end of you. You knew it was the end of you. You run straight toward Ray Lewis, you wasn't about to try and truck him. He was going to put you down. Lawrence Taylor, all these other guys and things like that were great defensive guys. In this league today, they wouldn't even be able to do what they do best. Yeah, they're great tacklers. And that's what it seems like. That's what the league wants you to focus on, tackling. We're not going to hit. Just tackle them, wrap them up and roll. They want you to do the stuff you used to get clowned for by big hitters. When big hitters talk about, you just go for the legs, man. I'm trying to kill this dude. Like, you almost can't even say stuff like that anymore, or else it's just looked at as this dude is playing the game for the wrong reasons. He wants to intentionally hurt people, things like that. And it's like, no, that's not the case. He's just playing football. Like, that's all it is. He's just playing football. It's not like he's trying to really kill somebody. He's intense. And like I was just talking about with the March Madness thing. It's millions of fans watching the game. They're cheering on and stuff like that. In the NFL, it's only so many games you can lose, especially if teams in your conference is winning. So it's really only so many games you can lose. So it's like every game counts. You want to win every single game that you play. So it's intense. And when a running back or somebody comes running and it's a big smack on anybody, regardless of what position on the defense made it. If it's a big smack on the field, people are going to get hyped. You see people on the sidelines jumping around. You see people in the crowd yelling, jumping around, players on the field jumping around. And that's the game on thing. That's when you got to strap your vest on and hey, buckle up. It's time to fight. It's war. That kind of stuff. It's going to be quiet. That's my estimate on it. That's just what I think is going to happen. Eventually, I think they're going to start reviewing too much. And that's just what they got to be careful with that. They got to be careful with that because people already fall asleep on some football games if it's not their team they're watching and things like that. And they just really got to be careful with it. Yes, the DB and receiver thing is a good thing. And I also believe that it's great that they're changing that. But they got to be careful with it because I have a feeling they're going to start reviewing way too much. And I don't want that to happen because it takes away from the game. People are not watching the game to see referees huddled up all day. They're not watching the game to see the zebras huddled up, man. They don't want to see that. They don't want to see that, especially in the last thing they want to see is referees do all of this reviewing, look at the monitor for 20 minutes, do all of this reviewing, and then all of a sudden still come with bad results. That's like the worst thing possible that can happen is The referees do all of this reviewing, and they still come back to the field, announce it, and it's horrible results. But I know that's going to happen. Even though they're reviewing these flag calls and stuff like that, I think that's really just there so they don't miss these blatant calls, like the one that happened in the NFC Championship with the Saints. So they don't miss these blatant calls, like because that was so obvious. It was so obvious that the receiver got smacked out the air before he didn't even get close to touching the ball. He just got smacked out the air. And things like that, yeah, they better get that right if they go back and review it. That's something they have to get right if they go back and review it. But in the meantime, it's like, hey, these small little calls, and every coach is different. Some coaches are very quick to throw the challenge flag. Other coaches are not. They'd rather just keep that time out and don't worry about it and just keep moving on. Some coaches who throw it, I'm telling you, man, sometimes it's gonna make that fan base upset. Late game come around, they like, no, review that. That was a flag, push off, whatever, or pass interference, things like that. Review it, throw the challenge flag out there, and it's gonna come back negative, and it's gonna hurt. It's gonna hurt to the core because it's gonna come back negative. It's gonna hurt. But overall, I do like that they're doing that, man. That's a good placement for the NFL.